Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Yang berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Rastam Muhammad Isa, Chairman and Chief Executive, Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, Professor Dr. Aileen Vera, Chair of ASEAN ISIS Network, and President Asia-Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation from the Philippines. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to the 33rd Asia-Pacific Roundtable. It is indeed a pleasure to be here to address this distinguished gathering of scholars and policymakers at this conference. This is not the first time I'm speaking in the Asia-Pacific Roundtable. I'm told there is at least a handful among those here today who have heard me addressing this conference several times since 1980s. And I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome back those of you who have been with us all these years. Ladies and gentlemen, after more than 3 decades, the Asia-Pacific Roundtable has become something of an institution in Asia and to a certain degree to the world as well. When we began organizing the Roundtable in 1987, it was felt that it was a good time to bring together people from different ideological backgrounds to discuss major issues, strategic issues affecting the region and the rest of the world. Malaysia subscribes to the idea that nations which once may be opposed to each other should find common grounds and become partners in ventures and endeavors that would benefit both. Hostility and belligerence benefits no one except those arms traders and of course the war profiteers. And such rejection of wars serves our region well, as it had enjoyed relative peace and had prospered from that very peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been saying this and I will repeat it again here today. At a time when we pride ourselves as being civilized, we find leading nations still bent on killing people in the pursuit of their national interests and agenda. There is nothing civilized nor advanced when war is an option to solve problems. We should all work towards criminalizing wars. We must campaign against wars, and it must be an international creed that must be subscribed to very much like our commitments to protect the environment, freedom, and fundamental liberties. In fact, criminalizing wars should be one of the top priorities of the international communities, knowing that when wars are fought, human lives become insignificant. How can that be acceptable when we know in a war, civilians, children, women, the weak, the sick, and the elderly face the same possibilities of being killed as the soldiers? At the same time, as the international communities campaign for the abolishment of capital punishment, even of murderers, we choose to be silent when the thousands and thousands of civilians and soldiers are killed in military campaigns. And the warmongers love to glorify their killers with medals and statues and repeated mentions in their history books. Wars are about killings and massive destruction. It is a primitive, and if we consider ourselves as civilized, we should oppose wars.
This is the creed that Malaysia, new and old, have always subscribed to, and we are glad that it is shared by ASEAN nations, which had made the regional grouping peaceful and dynamic, focused in intra and inter-regional development. Ladies and gentlemen, when the new coalition took over the governance of Malaysia after the May 9th, 2018 general election in Malaysia, much hope was pinned on the new government to provide better focus and direction in our foreign policies. Of course, domestically, the expectations are equally high in terms of addressing our economic woes, mostly inflicted upon us by the previous government. We were and still are struggling to resolve our economic debilities battered by the financial shenanigans of the previous administration. A year had passed, and I am happy to state that we have managed to overcome the worst of the legacies of the chaos we inherited. For the information of the regional and international communities, the new Malaysia has forged an image of fairness, good governance, democracy, and the rule of law. We reject corruption and has instituted laws, rules, and practices to reduce and abolish corruption. While the nation's economic resuscitation hinges on our domestic policies, the regional and global development threaten to unhinge these strategies and plans, and we have to be alert to external uncertainties and disruptions and prepare ourselves to counter them. Ladies and gentlemen, this region has long witnessed regional and global power play firsthand, but we have prevailed and become much wiser. As a nation and collectively as ASEAN, we have guarded our independence and neutrality despite our many agreements on trade and cooperation. Present geopolitical uncertainties and the looming battle for trade supremacy have yet again threatened our determination to rise above partisanship and realignments. While we welcome international collaboration in ensuring the security and peace in and around the region, we also do not wish to be dragged into the one-manship of powerful nations and their military presence in our zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. More than ever, the cohesiveness of the nations of the region is crucial, more than at any other period in its contemporary history. We will not allow ourselves to be dragged into conflicts initiated by others. It has been shown that the interests of small nations can be defended if they are united as a regional grouping, and Southeast Asia's ASEAN has been credited as one of the most successful regional organizations ever established. ASEAN, as a regional community, has attained a record wherein no country that has joined it has voluntarily left. Instead, countries from different regions wish to be a part of it. Though at this point in time, the ASEAN countries may not be posting double-digit GDP growth, but it is not a regional affliction, but rather a global phenomenon. Within our midst, the Asian tigers are still prowling though some may have been hibernating for a while. They will wake up and reclaim their rightful position in time. The ASEAN community has a population of about 660 million, half of which are below 30 years of age. This year, the ASEAN community is projected to generate, in purchasing power terms, a GDP of USD $9 trillion. In 5 years, that number is projected to rapidly grow up to USD 13 trillion, and making all this possible is the jealously guarded combination of peace, security, and stability across the region. Ladies and gentlemen, member states do not need to agree on everything to work well together. What counts is that we share basic principles of mutual respect, cooperation, sovereign equality, and common regional prosperity and well-being. When there is dispute, we go to the table and discuss and negotiate. If we fail, we resort to arbitration or go to the international courts of justice. We abide by the decisions. Malaysia won in our overlapping claims of territory with Indonesia, but lost in another with Singapore. All parties accepted the decision, though we still feel strongly about our rights to the disputed territory that we lost. In the case of overlapping claims with Thailand, we decided to jointly share in the extraction of oil under the Joint Development Authority. We have profited tremendously, though this unique cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, 52 years ago, 52 years on, ASEAN has become a thriving community in a stable and peaceful region. As I have pointed out earlier, disputes have been managed, though a few have not been resolved. For many ASEAN member nations, ASEAN is important enough to be a major factor in the charting of their foreign policies. ASEAN regionalism seems to be taken for granted and sustained only by fulfilling 1,000 routine obligatory meetings each year. The much debated concept of ASEAN centrality deserves greater commitment. A modern competitive world expects and demands proactive regional policy energized by fresh thinking. ASEAN has room for taking leadership on this front. ASEAN has no shortage of transnational institutions to drive it. The ASEAN Regional Forum, the East Asia Summit, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, to name a few. ASEAN Plus 3, for instance, denotes an East Asia characterized and led by an ASEAN at peace with itself and its partners. ASEAN has no less than 15 formal partners spanning the globe as dialogue partners, sectoral dialogue partners, and development partners. Among the more prominent, perhaps, is a dialogue partnership with the European Union, which is covered in a session of this roundtable. This is potentially of intercontinental significance, being a partnership between a region of Asia with much of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, more than any other region, perhaps, Southeast Asia holds the promise of both high sustainable growth and peace with stability among neighbors. Its past achievements are on record. Southeast Asia as a whole has the distinct advantage of still being a developing region. That means it can develop further, unlike developed regions where development has leveled off. A decade ago, ASEAN rolled out its master plan for connectivity by the year 2025. You could say that China's plan to revive the ancient Silk Road today is ASEAN's master plan writ large. We in ASEAN can enjoy net gains if the Belt and Road Initiative can be designed to serve national and regional interests, just as the ASEAN Community Master Plan is intended. There should be no doubt that the BRI, with the full and fair participation of all stakeholders, can be a win-win proposition. National and regional development efforts would then be mutually complementary. Much depends on how we discuss and negotiate. We should then all work closely to see how we can identify and energize complementarities. Since Japan and others have their own connectivity and infrastructure development plans, these we also welcome. If ASEAN does not seize this moment, when these initiatives are for the taking, others may do so and in their own way, or nothing positive may happen at all. I have previously proposed new, improved rail networks between East Asia westwards through Central Asia and Eurasia to Europe. Freight by rail is faster than by ship and cheaper than by air. At the same time, we can enhance maritime connectivity eastwards across the Pacific to the Americas. Freight by sea is of course cheaper than by air and rail, albeit it is slower. But adequate maritime security and freedom of navigation, consistent with friendly trading relations with all states and parties, must be assured across oceans. Ports and naval assets en route can then refocus their purpose from dead-end war preparedness to a greater readiness for flourishing commerce. Some security provisions already in place can offer safer trade and travel for all. That is why I have emphasized that large warships on the high seas should be replaced by smaller patrol crafts better suited for routine policing against piracy and crime, terrorism and other non-traditional threats. We have to reprioritize and reorient our mindsets from a lose-lose war scenario to a win-win commercial prospect. But this requires strong political will. Issues of freedom of navigation and maritime security are better handled through cooperation and not through confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, a major challenge for all of us now is the US-China trade war. Its deterioration from a trading skirmish to a trade war has been most disappointing, with the prospect of worsening into a long-term Cold War. That would impact negatively on the rest of the world as helpless collateral damage. Both the United States and China would not be spared either, since the purpose of any war is to hurt each other. Some would say such a conflict is inevitable. China is clearly rising rapidly on virtually every front, and the long dominant United States seems unable or unwilling to accommodate China's growth. Part of China's rise is its expanding global connectivity, which includes electronic and transportation connectivity. That is part and parcel of globalization once championed by the United States. I hope the US and China will soon see enough sense to replace conflict with cooperation. Everyone will stand to gain much more when we collaborate with each other. but healthy competition should also be acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, as for Malaysia, our external security priorities will continue to be self-evident. The promotion of a peaceful, stable, and strategically autonomous neighborhood. When Thailand and Malaysia were confronted by insurgents along our common border, we acted together to resolve the problem. When violence fled again on the Thai side, Malaysia offered to bring the contending parties together in negotiations. But any approach would be for the Thais themselves to make. Malaysia's role was possible only upon the agreement of all the Thai parties and upon the invitation of the Thai authorities. The same applies for Malaysia's role in southern Philippines. When piracy worsened in the Straits of Malacca, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia joined forces to tackle it. Thailand later joined in the international effort. Where there is a willingness to negotiate with the shared goal of peace, there is hope. We trust such prospects can exist in Myanmar's Rakhine State between the government, vigilant groups, and the Rohingya community. If a country or region can deal with its own challenges successfully without creating problems for others, there is no need for external intervention. Sovereign nations generally do not like external intervention. Fruitful international relations are possible only when national circumstances are equally healthy. Towards this end, we believe Malaysia and the region will prevail. I thank you.
Thank you, Yang Amat Berhormat Tun Dr Mahathir, moderated by Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah. We invite Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. It was a very... please raise your hand and state your name, and then please be as brief as possible. Can I have the first hand? Yes, sir. Is there a mic? Or you can borrow the mic from, yes.
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Carlos Felix, Ambassador of Mexico. Thank you very much for this very enlightened presentation. My question is more related for the relationship of Malaysia to the Pacific countries in Latin America, and specifically the next APEC meeting that is going to take place in Chile, and how you see the opportunity precisely to enhance this cooperation that we will have for many years, but now in the new Malaysia we would like to expand to that purpose. Thank you.
Hello. Well, thank you for your question. For a long time, Malaysia had nothing to do with Latin America. We were focused on Europe, but then Malaysia as a trading nation decides that Latin America must be a good market because the Europeans seem to be going there. So we went to Latin America, but for a time we were focused on problems at home and we neglected Latin America. But this new government will want to renew our relations with Latin America and improve the trade between Latin America and Malaysia. We feel that both sides will benefit by this context. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Ralph Costa from the Pacific Forum in Honolulu. Thank you, Dr. Mahathir, for your comments. This year, the ASEAN Regional Forum turns 25 years old. The ARF's plan was to transition from confidence building to preventive diplomacy to conflict resolution. But 25 years later, still at the confidence building measure stage. Do you anticipate further movement? What do you think are the reasons why the ARF has not been able to move toward preventive diplomacy and conflict resolution? Thank you.
Well, actually, we have been tackling a lot of conflicts. The conflict, the insurrection in southern Philippines have been resolved. That in northern Sumatra has been resolved, and we are now tackling the problem in Thailand. But by and large, the Southeast Asian nations are at peace with each other. These are internal problems of the countries concerned, and we are prepared to work together to solve even internal problems if we are allowed to. Of course, if the countries concerned do not want us to be interfering in what they call their internal affairs, we will not interfere. But there is a way for us to meet together every year, the leaders, I mean. We have summits, several summits in fact, and when leaders meet, they understand the gravity of the situation and they are prepared to make commitments in terms of ensuring that there would be peace in all the countries of ASEAN. So far, of course, ASEAN is perhaps the most peaceful regional organization compared to other regional organizations. Thank you.
Can I, yes, at the back, I see the lady with the glasses.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Prime Minister, what is Malaysia's view on the concept of the Indo-Pacific? We've had an extensive discussion on it yesterday, but we would like to hear your views on it. Thank you.
Well, actually, we are already involved. As you know, APEC involves the Pacific countries on the western coast of North and South America. So already we are involved with them, but of course we can enlarge that to include the countries along the Indian Ocean as well. But if we keep on enlarging, we will become the United Nations. And in the new United Nations formed by these areas, countries in these areas, we would ask for veto power so that it will fail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, yeah, the gentleman at the back, and then later I'll come to the gentleman here. Yes, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ron Hiskin from Australia. You made reference to the processes that ASEAN manages, particularly the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Regional Forum. I wonder whether you feel that there is scope for ASEAN to play a more significant brokering role between China and the United States to try and resolve this escalating confrontation between the two, using either or both of those two forums.
Yeah. I think ASEAN is too insignificant to intervene in this confrontation between giants. They are very powerful, they have their own minds, and in fact we have to follow what they say. If they apply sanctions to any country, we too get the effect of the sanctions. We cannot trade with the countries that are being sanctioned by the United States, for example, because if we do, we ourselves would be subjected to such measures. So ASEAN would like to see peace, of course. We can talk quietly with people in the United States and China, but we cannot take a very strong stand politically in the world, although we do express our views that this confrontation, these trade wars between China and US is something that is not going to benefit any one of them and also will not benefit us. I hope that eventually good sense will prevail among the leaders of the two countries, particularly with the country that initiated this trade war. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman on the second row, please. Yeah.
Honorable Prime Minister, I have come back to your country for a second time. I was here when you was Prime Minister, and I'm back again when you are Prime Minister again. My question is, in May 2019, there was a meeting in Naypyidaw, Yangon, where we had a very good meeting with the ASEAN Center for Humanitarian Assistance, and from the Myanmar side, chaired by the Social Welfare Minister. And in what way would Malaysia be helping ASEAN's effort to help alleviate the problems and sufferings of all the displaced persons in Bangladesh, as well as for the peace and development of Rakhine? Thank you.
Well, Malaysia would like to put itself up as a good model. Maybe other people may not agree, but we would like to put ourselves up as a good model. This country is a multiracial country. It used to be a Malay country, Tanah Melayu, the land of the Malays. But other people came to live here. They were brought here actually by the British during the British colonial period. When we were struggling for independence, the British suggested that we accept all the newcomers as citizens of the country. And we did. We didn't ask them to leave. We accepted them as citizens of this country, and they participate fully in the politics of this country. There has never been a government of Malaysia where the children or the offsprings of the former migrants are not participating. I think it is good to adjust to circumstances. I think getting rid of foreigners because they are different, or you claim that they are foreigners and not national citizens, is not really a good way of solving a problem. You see this happening in Africa, and in the end, although they expelled the Indians from Africa, the Indians came back because they can help prosper the countries. I am quite sure that with peace and the people in Rakhine State being given their rights, Myanmar will prosper and everyone will benefit. That is our view. But of course, the people in Myanmar may have other views. But it is good to look at what happens in other countries in order to solve problems that you are faced domestically. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, please.
Distinguished Prime Minister, I'm from China, Shanghai Academy of Global Governance and Area Studies. I'm really a genuine admirer of you, because in China we will address you as an evergreen politician. You know, I would like two questions. One is about it's a history question. In 1998, 1997, the financial crisis then occurred in Southeast Asia. And what happened as a Prime Minister, you actually made a magnificent job and dragged Malaysia out of the trap by means of rejecting all the very popular ideas from the Western ideology. So I'm just going to ask you, in what way in the future Malaysia's modernization how to proceed on the way of modernization in response to Malaysia's national characteristics. And the second question is about the Belt and Road Initiative. And I really agree with your opinion about the world today is covered by the cloud of uncivilized opinions and barbarity. And happy thing is we do have some very constructive ideas to connect the world together and to build up a win-win or all-win participation platform. And actually, in your previous comments about the world, you do have a personal, very huge strategy about the world, and actually you try to build up a connection between Asia and Europe as well as the world. So it's a very beautiful vision at that time. I want to ask the question is, in what way Belt and Road Initiative and your personal plan of the future of the world would have coincidence? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. In 1997, East Asia faced a financial crisis. We decided that that financial crisis was brought on by currency trading. They have treated currency like a commodity. And currency is not a commodity to be traded like coffee or sugar or whatever. Currency is an exchange mechanism that will enable us to trade with each other. So when we decided that it was currency trading that brought us down, the only way we can stop that is to take our currency out of their hands where they could no longer trade. We learned this actually from China and Chile. China and Chile at that time did not allow their currencies to be traded, and they became very stable. Looking at that, we decided that the only way to fight against currency traders is to take our currency out of their hands. We declare that any currency trade, any Malaysian ringgit traded internationally will not be recognized by us. And we fix the exchange rate. And once we fix the exchange rate and we guarantee availability of US dollars if people want at that rate, and that all trading which brings in US dollars must be deposited with Malaysian banks so that when later on they need the US currency, they can have access to the US currency now in the Malaysian bank, then trade could go on very steadily without any uncertainties and fluctuation in the value of currency. I think traders believe in a stable currency. They don't like a fluctuating currency because it's so difficult even to prepare the budget for the year. So in the end, our action, which was condemned as being a wrong action that will result in our economy suffering and all that, was acknowledged even by the World Bank and the IMF that it was a good strategy to adopt and that Malaysia recovered because of that. Now, with regard to the Belt and Road project by China, actually the Belt and Road has been there all the time. Since ancient time, I think ships have passed through the Straits of Malacca and up the South China Sea to reach China, to reach Japan and Korea, and etc. This has been the trading route. What we need is more application, more usage of this route, free from actions taken to check and do anything. There should be free navigation along this route. Now, from east to west, there has always been the Silk Road. What is being done now is to improve the performance or the availability of the Silk Route by using better transportation means. We had suggested that just as ships were made bigger and bigger because of the trade in oil, the trains that crosses from China right up to Europe should also grow and become bigger and maybe faster also, because there is this new technology that enables us to transport things faster and in greater bulk. So if you have that kind of facility, then trade between China and Europe would increase, and also the Central Asian countries would be able to export their raw materials and receive goods from Europe and from China at a lower cost. So it will benefit all the countries of Asia, and it will also, the sea route would also benefit countries like Malaysia, which is along the way. And although nowadays ships don't have to stop for victuals and water, I'm quite sure that they will want to stop and unload some of their goods or pick up some goods from Malaysia. That will have Malaysia and the other countries along the road to grow their business. So it is a very good suggestion, and we should all sit down together and translate this idea into a policy that benefits all. In Beijing, we went there, everyone was there, we sat around the table and we discussed the implication and the meaning of the Belt and Road policy. Countries like Brunei, which has only 300,000 people, can sit down at the same table together with China with 1.4 billion people. It is not something that is cooked somewhere else and then we are asked to accept them or else. That is not the proper way to promote international cooperation. Let every stakeholder have a say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Andrew Golodzinowski, High Commissioner. To be here to hear you speak. My question is about trade, which you've identified as a high priority for Malaysia. And next year, of course, Malaysia will be chairing APEC. And next year is also a very important year for APEC because the Bogor goals will have expired and new goals will be agreed. I wonder, Tun, if you could share with us your vision of what APEC should be striving to achieve next year.
The problem with our initial rejection of APEC was because it gave too much power to the business community, to the extent that they may sue governments if they lose whatever they lose in that country. And we know from experience that Peru, for example, had to stop the mining operation in Peru because it was causing a lot of environmental problem. But when it stopped, the company sued the government for future profits, loss of future profits. We don't know whether they would make profits in the future or not, but nevertheless, they claimed that they would lose future profit because the government had stopped the mining to reduce the environmental damage. Same thing happened with Ecuador, I think. This kind of power given to the business community frightens small countries like ours because the award may be huge, and this is something that cannot be accepted by poorer countries. But now the US is no longer in. There is some modification of the terms that was proposed before, and we are considering this because some of these terms may clash with our domestic policies. Malaysia has got a multiracial population, and it is important for us to keep the races enjoying life together. But if without government intervention, one race becomes more richer than the other, there may be tension within the races, and this is not good for Malaysia. So we are looking into this area where we should be allowed to apply our own solution to our domestic problem without breaching the terms of the agreements to be made between the countries participating in the Pacific Partnership group that is now being promoted by countries which were before in the PTP, but now without the US. So we are still looking at it, and we feel that anything that contributes to more trade for Malaysia will always be good for Malaysia. Thank you.
Yes, can I have the gentleman there? Yeah, please.
It also, in the context of South China Sea, has claimant interest. How do you balance the interest? How do you really see the current situation in the South China Sea? Is it overemphasized? Is it getting better? Or is it getting worse? And if possible, how would you recommend going forward to a better situation?
We believe in peaceful ways of solving conflicts. We don't believe in threatening to do damage to a country so that that country will submit to our wishes. So Malaysia would advocate the countries concerned, which has imbalance in their trade, should sit down and solve that problem through mutual adjustment. If China is exporting too much to the United States, China should be told that this is not healthy and that China should buy more from the United States so that the imbalance is corrected. But sending warships in order to, to provoke is not the solution really. We believe that if any small incident flares up into a big war, then the whole world is going to suffer. I have never forgotten the fact that when Archduke Ferdinand was murdered, following that there was a world war where 7 million people were killed just because one man was murdered. So that is not something that we like to see happening here, where perhaps warships should make passes at each other, and then something might happen, and this may flare up into a war in the South China Sea, which will never be good for any of our countries, and certainly not good for China or America. Thank you.
Yes, Sila.
International legal institutions and your emphasis on peaceful solution of these international conflicts, then my question is, how can we prevent big powers from resorting to the use of physical force? How can we make them abide by international law?
Well, we can preach to them of the goodness of international law. After the last war, where millions of people were killed, the big powers decided that the world should have an organization which includes all the members, all the countries of the world. And so the United Nations was set up. Unfortunately, the big powers decided that they should have veto power. And that, as you know, has paralyzed the United Nations completely. So one solution to that is either to get rid of the veto power or to make it less frequently used. For example, if there is to be a veto, it should come from at least 2 countries supported by 3 non-permanent members of the Security Council. That way, I think the use of veto power would not frustrate the possibilities of the United Nations becoming effective in solving international conflicts. So the rule of law, we are told, Malaysia is told that you must abide by the rule of law. But the very people who ask us to abide by the rule of law do not abide by the rule of law in international affairs. This is something very odd. the democratic countries which ask us to be democratic and have become members of United Nations, which is totally undemocratic. So unless we are prepared to recognize the weakness and the faults of the past, we will not be able to make the rule of law internationally effective. That is the Malaysian view. Thank you.
Okay, the last question will come from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I'm the EU ambassador to ASEAN. You made a reference before about the potentiality of intercontinental relation between the European Union and ASEAN, and I would like to ask you, please, if you can elaborate a little bit on that. Music to my ears, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, ASEAN seems to attract the attention of the rest of the world, and everybody wants to interact with ASEAN. Many want to join ASEAN, but of course we have to confine ourselves to Southeast Asia. But that should not prevent us from interacting with other people in the region. So we have ASEAN plus 3, which is ASEAN plus 3 big countries of the Northeast Asia. And Europe is a very important trading partner as well as political partner for ASEAN countries. It is important that we should know what the Europeans are doing and how they expect to interact with us. So every year we meet Europe as ASEAN plus 1, but Europe of course is not just one country, it's a collection of countries. And the opportunity to discuss things between Malaysia and Europe is very important to Malaysia because we must understand European policies so that we can, trade more with them. Currently, of course, we have a problem with Europe not wanting to buy palm oil. I hope that you will buy palm oil. Thank you.